Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 20th of March. So coming to the first article, to be fighting fit. Now the context here is with regards to the defense budget. The defense budget has been criticized by the military. It is said to have dashed the hopes of the army. So that is one issue with regards to the defense budget. Now what are the implications of a constrained defense budget is something that has been analyzed in this editorial. So that is something that is the importance here. Now coming to the issues, the first issue is with regards to the recent report by Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. As per this institute, India was the largest arms importer in the last 5 years, accounting for 12% of the global imports. Also, India's defense budget is now the 5th largest budget in the entire world. So it is not that India is spending less, it is that India's requirements are way too high to be catered by the current defense budget. So that is the first analysis here. Another thing is about the insufficient defense budget and the impacts that it has. Now, whenever the defense budget is going to be insufficient, then this is going to have two impacts. One is the futuristic impact, which means that it will cut short the future capabilities of the military. It will prevent the army or the defense forces from modernization. So that is the first impact. The second impact is that it impacts the current operational readiness of the forces. Now, already the forces have some current preparedness which they need to sustain. So the sustainability becomes difficult, and that is what is going to constitute the impact of a cut in the defense budget. So that is something that is important. Another important analysis has been given with regards to the strategic environment in Asia. Now you need to know here that Asia is now a ground for multipolar powers. Within Asia, we are seeing that major powers are entering Asia to rebalance each other, or pivot Asia was a policy of the US. US is entering Asia, Russia is participating in Asia, China is directly involved in Asia. So in that context, it becomes important that India also maintains its strategic deterrence within Asia. And for that, a strong defense forces is something that is going to be primarily important. So in that context, the army has to be strong. And that is something that has been analyzed here, that the government's decision to cut on defense budget shouldn't compromise on its capabilities to counter the challenges in Asia. That is what has been analyzed here. Another area which is important is South Asia. First and foremost, there is always a threat of war that India faces from Pakistan. You should know that the relations have worsened between India and Pakistan. So in that context also, deterrence by the army is something that is going to be very important. There is also instability in Afghanistan, which is going to directly impact South Asia. Also in the Indian Ocean, there is rising hegemony of China, and there are security threats in the Indian Ocean. So from that perspective also, the Navy has to be more equipped to deal with the challenges in Indian Ocean. So in that context also, a robust defense budget is what is indeed warranted. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another issue is that of a two-front war. Time and again, defense experts are warning that India could face a scenario of a two-front war. A two-front war simply means that India could face a war at its two fronts, that is one at Pakistan and the other front with China. So this is one of the most challenging scenario for any country, because this divides the defense capabilities of the countries into two halves, and this is an advantage to its enemies. So in that context, the army has to be prepared for this two-front war, and this is something that is being analyzed in this editorial, that despite continuous warnings of a two-front war, the government is not paying heed to it, and the government is not preparing well for this two-front war. So that is something that is important. Another issue which is very important and which has been discussed here is with regards to the social factors which are prevalent in India. You should know that India was ranked 131 in the Human Development Index of 2016. This was one of the lowest rankings. Also, 55.3% of India's population is under multidimensional poverty. Now, with such constraints, such social constraints, it becomes very difficult for a country to allocate finances for defense. So that is one challenge which the government faces, to uplift the people out of poverty, or compromise and allocate the budget for defense needs of the country. So that is one prevalent or perennial question which every developing country faces, and this is a question which even India is facing at present. So that is one important analysis. Another thing is with regards to strategic consultation between political and military leadership. Now what is being seen is that such kind of strategic consultations between political and military leadership only take place during emergencies. This is not something that is sustained, and this does not result in a long-term policy. And this is what is resulting in a scenario where both the political leadership and the military leadership are not on the same page, and the concerns of each other are not being addressed, and there is a trust deficit which is coming between the politicians and the military leaderships. That is something that is important here. Another important analysis is with regards to the need for a holistic look at all the border guarding forces. Now you should know that the borders are not guarded by a single force, but there are a number of forces which are guarding the borders. This includes the Army, the Assam Rifles, the BSF, the ITPP. So if these are the plethora of forces, then the focus of the government should be equally on all these forces. And this is what will lead to a comprehensive and an integrated approach towards border management. And if such an approach is what is adopted, then this will result in considerable savings, which will result in lesser allocation of defense budget. So this is something that has been suggested in this particular editorial, that if this is the policy that the government is going to focus, then indeed there can be some cuts which the government can afford in defense budget. Another thing which is very important here is with regards to the military capability. Now the editorial again suggests that the army should understand, the military should understand the realities of India's finances, and it should have empathy towards that. It should not primarily focus on the number of squadrons, ships, defense divisions, etc., but rather it should focus on increasing the effectiveness of what the military resources already are, and it should focus on increasing the capability of the military. This can primarily happen by linking more and more technology into the military, which includes technology like robotics or autonomous systems, or for that matter artificial intelligence. So what is required is that innovation is what is done in this sector. This is something that the government also needs to focus upon, rather than going by the old policies of more boots on the ground, or for that matter more weaponry. So some degree of innovation, some degree of newer capabilities is what should be added to the military to make the military more powerful. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing which has been suggested is a greater integration between the three services. Now the editorial says that the luxury of each service running its own training institutions, administration and logistics system is no longer affordable for India. So there should be greater integration between the three services, that is the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, so that there can be some defense budget which can be allocated for other uses, and there can be prudence in the utility of defense budget. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing which is important is with regards to defense deals. Now you need to know that defense deals in India are facing several challenges in the past. They are largely being criticized for corruption and other issues. Some data is something that has been given, that approximately 8 to 10% of the 144 process deals is what has been implemented in India in the past few years. So this is a major concern. It is not only that the defense budget is short, it is that it is not effective. What happens is that whenever defense deals are going to be prolonged, whenever there is going to be a delay, then it results in a cost escalation, and that is something that needs to be curbed. If efficient defense deals are carried out immediately, then some degree of budgetary resources can be better utilized, and that is what has been analyzed in this editorial. The editorial is important because in the internal security aspect, defense budget will be something that is important, and a question can come. So that is going to be the relevance here. Now coming to the next article, the first step in a long journey. Now this is context with regards to the NMC Bill, which is the National Medical Commission Bill of 2017. Some important aspects related to this bill is what has been analyzed in the editorials. The first issue is with regard to Article 47. The Article 47 is part of the Directive Principles of State Policy. Under Article 47, it is mandatory that the state, or it is the duty of every state to improve public health. The state is duty bound to improve public health in its area. So that is something that is important here. Another issue which has been analyzed is with regards to the health crisis that already India is facing. Now, this is an important analysis. India is indeed facing a health crisis because India is shorting of 3 lakh doctors approximately to meet the WHO standards of 1 doctor per 1,000 population. At present, India's ratio is 1 doctor per 1700 patients. So indeed, there's a huge gap from the WHO recommendation. So in that context, more and more doctors are what are required. Another thing is that approximately 81% shortage of specialists is what is there in the community health center. So this is one important issue of crisis within India. Another thing which is important is that the rural population, which comprises of 69% of population, is catered to by only 21% of the doctors in India. So you can see that this ratio is further skewed in the rural area. So that is one important analysis. Also, the quality of healthcare within India is very poor. Another thing is that out-of-pocket expenditure in India is very high because the health sector has been taken over by the private players. So all of these are something that are leading to a situation of a health crisis in India. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another issue is with regards to medical tourism. Now, the editorial discusses that it is a paradox that on one hand, the government wants to promote medical tourism and wants to make India the champion of medical tourism in the entire world. But on the other hand, the citizens themselves are not getting basic facilities. There is a very poor quality of public healthcare within India. So that is one paradox what has been highlighted in this editorial. Another issue which has been discussed is with regards to the commercialization of medical education. Now, the editorial says that it was Section 10A of the Indian Medical Commission Act which led to finally the commercialization of medical education. And this has led to an exponential rise in the number of private medical colleges. And this has had several adverse impacts. For example, there has been a high capitation fee which has impacted the affordability of medical services within the country. Also, there have been a lot of corruption cases which have emerged with regards to issuing of licenses and regulatory requirements of these medical colleges. Another thing is that there is a poor quality of education within these private medical institutions, and this is further impacting the quality of healthcare within the country. So these are some issues which are related to the commercialization of medical education. Now, in that context, this bill is somehow a panacea because this bill proposes for assessing and rating of medical colleges. The bill says that the bill also envisages a penalty for those who are failing to adhere to the norms, and if there are 3 such consecutive failures by any private medical college, then in that case it will also lead to the de-recognition of that particular college. So this is something that the NMC bill envisages. Another thing which is very important here is that the bill provides for a clause for relaxation of norms for setting up medical colleges. At present, there is a blanket standard for setting up medical colleges within India, as a result of which some contextual realities of some states is something that is being ignored. For example, a state might have some difficult terrain, or it might be in a low population density region. So because of that, these states are not getting medical colleges. For example, Arunachal Pradesh, or for that matter, Mizoram and Nagaland, these 3 states do not even have a single medical college. So this is something that needs to be treated. This needs to be corrected. In that regard, this new bill is going to be aiding it. So that is one important analysis. Another issue is with regards to an inverted pyramid health structure within India. Now you should know that a pyramidal health infrastructure was what was envisaged. The bottom was to be comprising of the primary health care. This was to be followed by a community health care which would have a specialist, and this was to be followed by a tertiary health care. Now the first contact of the patient should be at the primary health care, and it is then that after the primary healthcare, a patient should move upwards in the pyramid. This is something that is not happening in India. This is primarily because of the poor primary healthcare system in the country. What happens is that instead of going to the primary healthcare, a patient directly goes to the tertiary healthcare, which inverses this pyramid. And this causes a huge amount of adverse impact because specialists are wasting their time on ordinary diagnosis or minor illnesses which can be easily dealt with a lower qualified doctor. So that is something that has been analyzed in this editorial, that this needs to be corrected. The new Ayushman Bharat program talks about setting up wellness centers in the country. So if these wellness centers are somehow going to be set up, they are going to be associated with the primary healthcare centers, and this is going to correct this issue of inverted pyramid. So So this is something that is going to be an advantage of this new bill. So this is something that has been envisaged. Now, to cater to the requirements of these wellness centers and primary health care centers, what is important is that a bridge course be allowed. Now, we have been discussing in the past also that this bridge course will allow the Ayush professionals to practice allopathic medicine. Now, approximately there are 7,70,000 Ayush professionals in the country, and this pool can be used to provide basic diagnosis at the PHC and subcenter level. So that is something that this bill envisages. Also, the editorial discusses that already 13 states in India are allowing Ayush professionals to practice allopathic medicine. Now, if these states are doing it, then this bill, the passing of this bill will only allow that these kind of laws, these kind of state laws are more homogenized and more regulated. So indeed, this is a way forward. So that is something that has been analyzed in this editorial. As I've time and again been mentioning, health is going to be very important. So is the NMC bill. So that is going to be the relevance here. Now, coming to the next article, bending the rules. The context here is with regards to the environmental clearance for the Neutrino Observatory within India. Now, some background is what is vital here. Now, what do you understand by neutrino first and foremost? Now, neutrino is a subatomic particle which are very difficult to detect. And this observatory is being planned to be set up in the Theni district of Tamil Nadu. So this is something that you should know. And this observatory has not been given an environmental clearance in the past by the NGT. The National Green Tribunal had denied an environmental clearance to this particular observatory. But now what has happened is that the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change has given it the environmental clearance, overriding the previous judgment of the NGT. So that is what has become a controversial issue now. That is the primary conflict here. Now, coming to the issues which are important, the first issue is with regards to India's quest for research in particle physics. Now, you need to know that India is way behind in research on particle physics compared to global standards. So India is indeed aiming to establish a center of excellence, and this is something that is in the interest of developing scientific tempo within the country and promoting science and technology and innovation within the country. So indeed, this is a noble cause. So that is something that is important. Another thing which is important with regards to the Neutrino Observatory is that it cannot be established anywhere. It has some geographical relevance. It requires a certain degree of rock cover to minimize the naturally occurring cosmic ray backdrop. Now, it is in that context that this particular site in the Theni district of Tamil Nadu has been selected. So, it is not easy for this observatory to move away, and that is what is leading to a more conflict. Another thing which is important is with regards to the environmental concerns. Now, what you need to know here that in this proposed site is in the proximity to the Mathiketan Shola National Park in Kerala's Western Ghat, which is a global biodiversity hotspot. So, indeed, setting up this particular neutrino observatory is going to have some environmental impacts on a geographically biodiverse regions. That is one cause of concern. Another thing which is very important here is with regards to the Environmental Impact Assessment Notification of 2006. Now, as per this notification, there is a section 8A, and this section 8A divides two categories of projects. One is in the category A and the second is in the category B. Now, category A projects are the projects which require more care. This category disallows any project within 4.9 km of a national park, and this project will be within 4.9 km of this national park. So the issue here is that the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, considered this project under the category A, and as a result of which it said that this project cannot be established in this region. Now, what has happened is that the Ministry of Environment and Forest has considered this project under the category B, which allows for setting up such kind of projects. So that is one major conflict which is appearing between these two institutions. So that is something that is going to be important here. Another issue is that this particular environmental impact assessment was done by the Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History, and this is an unaccredited agency. So the environmental impact assessment by an uncredited agency itself is something that is being questioned. Another thing is that public consultation in this context was done in the year 2010. So this again is being called as outdated. So this environmental impact assessment of this particular project is itself flawed, and that is what the editorial is discussing here. Something that has been highlighted by this editorial is, which is very important, is that if this project is given a green flag, then indeed this is going to set up a wrong precedent in the country. Indeed, this project is very important, but for simply the national importance of this project cannot override the economic concerns which are emerging in this region. And if this project is given a green flag, then some other project, it is akin to opening a Pandora's box, because some other projects of national importance will also ask such kind of flouting of environmental impact assessment notification and being considered in the category B. So that is one issue which this editorial is discussing. Now, a direct question is doubtful, but yes, this can be used as an example between development needs of a country and environmental impact assessment. In that context, this issue can be used as an example. So that is going to be the relevance here. Now, coming to the next article, time to move beyond subsidies. Now, the context here is with regards to USA's complaint to the World Trade Organization against India's export promotion scheme. Now, this is the first time that US has filed a complaint in the WTO against India's export promotion scheme. Now, coming to the issues. First and foremost, you need to know about this complaint. This complaint is made under the agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures. So this is something that is important, that the agreement is the agreement of subsidies and countervailing measures. This agreement under the WTO disallows for some export promotion schemes. For example, technology parks are an export promotion scheme, or for that matter, special economic zones are an export promotion scheme. Some incentives that are given to the exporters is something that is constituting an export promotion scheme. So these export promotion schemes are not allowed under the WTO. This is primarily because WTO wants to move away from such kind of benefits or export promotion scheme to ensure free trade amongst all the countries. So that is something that is important here. Now, you should know that India was allowed for these export promotion scheme up till 2015, because till 2015 India's gross national product was less than $1,000. Now, if this was one figure which was established by the WTO. Now, in the year 2015, India's gross national product surpassed this limit, and as a result of which, now India is not entitled to the benefits or the exceptions that were provided under this particular agreement. However, India is still continuing with these export promotion schemes, and as a result of which, US has now filed a complaint with the WTO. So that is something that is important. Another important analysis is that in the Doha Development Agenda of the WTO, all the developing countries had demanded that this tenure be increased. A transition period should be allowed to countries to make a shift from this issue of export promotion schemes to an area where no export promotion schemes are favored. But the Doha Development Agenda is itself cancelled by the WTO. So that is another controversial issue. Now, coming to some previous cases in this regard, you should know that since the year 2010, US has been raising question on India's export promotion schemes and subsidies. But officially, US has never gone to the WTO, and this is the first time that an official complaint is what is made. So that is something that is important. Another thing which is important here is with regards to the foreign trade policy of 2015 and 17. Now, in both the foreign trade policy of India, national foreign trade policy of 2015 and 17, both reflected that the government was aware that India was on the verge of losing its benefits under this exception of this particular agreement. But the issue is that this has somehow not reflected in the policy of the government, or for that matter in the implementation of the government, because the government is still continuing with these export promotion schemes. And the biggest export promotion scheme of India, which is the Merchandise Export from India scheme, this is a scheme for promoting exports in the textile sector. This is something that was introduced in the aftermath of 2015, and that is one of the major bone of contention between India and US. So that is something that is important. Another important analysis in this editorial is that questions are being raised on the real impact of these export promotion schemes. Now, it is said that there is no conclusive evidence that such kind of subsidies and schemes actually increase the number of exports. So even if India tomorrow has to move away from these schemes, it should not be something that India should be very much against, because the real impact is yet to be analyzed. So that is something that is important. Another suggestion which has been made is that India should have a newer area of focus. Today or tomorrow, India being India being more economically stronger, India will face such kind of objections. So India should now make a shift in its focus towards investing in trade-related infrastructure and trade facilitation measures which can deliver tangible results on the exports front rather than simply focusing on export promotion schemes and subsidies. So that is the final analysis here. A question indeed can be asked in this respect. This is an important issue. Also, when you have to discuss WTO, if a question comes on WTO, then this issue can be brought up. So that is going to be the relevance here. Now coming to the next article, a move to equivalence. The context here is with regards to the knowledge summit which is going to be taking place between India and France. You should know that in the context of the International Solar Alliance, a mutual recognition of educational qualifications is something that has been accepted by both India and France, and this is one of the major development because France is the first country with which an MOU in this regard has been signed. So that is going to be important here. Now coming to the issues, the first issue is about the problem in India. Now what you need to understand here is that approximately 5 lakh Indian students are studying in the best of foreign universities, but the issue is that their degrees are something that are not being recognized even in India. Now what is the recognition mechanism in India at present? Some knowledge about that is going to be vital for us. Now at present, the recognition of academic qualification is dealt with on a case-to-case basis in India. This is done by the Association of Indian Universities, and this is something that is important, which provides Indian students with an equivalence certificate based on the eligibility requirement and the duration of the courses. Now, at present, this case-to-case strategy reflects that there is no one policy which the government is following, and as a result of which it puts in question the future of these 5 lakh students, and that is something that has been questioned here. Another issue is with regards to the difference in duration of courses. Now, in foreign countries, a master's degree course is something that is done in 1 year. Whereas in India, the duration of a similar course will be 2 years. So what happens is that if a person does his master's in a foreign country and comes back to India, his degree is not recognized in India, and this is one of the major cause of concern. This also impacts research within the country. Primarily because for an MPhil degree or a PhD degree, or for that matter in JRF NET, which is the Junior Research Fellowship program, in that also what is required is a 2 years master's degree is what is mandatory. So if the 1 year degree is not going to be accepted, then these students will not be able to come and follow research within the country, and this is a major step back for India, because India is already facing a lot of shortage of research scholars in the country, and this is something that is akin to a state-sponsored brain drain. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another issue is with regards to diplomacy versus robust policy. Now what has happened in this case is that because of good diplomatic relation between India and France, this MOU has been signed. But the issue is that such kind of important policy decision should not be left on diplomacy. Rather, a robust policy is what is warranted in this regard, so that the future of these students who are studying in foreign universities is somehow stabilized. If they are merely left to diplomatic relation within the country, then the confidence of these students is somehow going to be shattered. So that is one important analysis. Another important aspect here is that for Indian universities to become world class, to compete with foreign universities, it is important that India should recognize the degrees of foreign universities so that students from those colleges can then come to India and study. So that is something that is important vis-a-vis the development of higher education within India also. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another important analysis is that this particular agreement between India and France can act as a leverage for getting similar concessions from other foreign countries, especially countries like UK, where approximately 16,500 students from India go to study each year, and of all these students, 70 to 80% of the students are going to study for master's degree. So if such kind of agreements are what is set up between these countries also, then indeed it is for the betterment of India. So that is something that has been analyzed. One thing which is important here is a question of equality. What often happens is that India wants to export its services. So India wants other countries to recognize its degrees. But on its own, in the case of India itself, India is unwilling to recognize the degrees of foreign countries within India. So this kind of a policy is something that cannot be accepted. A mutual recognition is something that is the way ahead, and that is the policy which India should follow here. So that is something that has been analyzed utilized in this editorial. This is a de novo aspect and this is going to be important. Now, based on today's discussion, please try and attempt these questions within a word limit of 150 words. And with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.